Questions without notice. Are there any questions? And I give the call to the Honourable the Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Is it the Prime Minister's position that he doesn't know if he personally supports Makarrata Treaty and truth-telling until he speaks with the referendum working group?
Order. The member for Lyons will cease interjecting. The issue of interjecting whilst ministers are approaching the dispatch box or during questions is highly disorderly. I give the call to the Prime Minister.
Thanks very much, Mr Speaker. I do note that in the lead-up to the referendum that was held on Saturday, in which Australians, as under our system, determined what their view was on the referendum question that was put for a constitutional recognition of First Australians through a voice to Parliament as a result of the invitation that was expressed at the Uluru Statement from the Heart in 2017. In the lead-up to that, they said that the government was distracted. Yes. I pointed out in the lead-up to that they'd asked every question
Order. The Prime
in
Minister
Parliament
will,
about
Prime Minister
nothing
will
about
pause.
cost of living.
Prime Minister will pause. Order. The member for Deakin will cease interjecting. I'll hear from the Leader of the Opposition.
Well, Mr Speaker, I seek your ruling in relation to relevance, and this is a very tight question. It asked the Prime Minister whether he personally knows what he thinks without having to consult others.
Order. Resume your seat. The question. Order. The question asked really for an expression of opinion, but it also mentioned the Uluru, the referendum and the referendum committee. Whilst the question is within order, it should really relate to government policy, not the opinion, but I'm allowing the question and I'll allow the Prime Minister to continue.
Yes, Mr Speaker, because once again what we see from the nature of this question is that it suggests
the member for Barker
that opinion should happen in a vacuum. And what we have campaigned for, I said very clearly, was to listen to First Australians about matters that affect them. Now, if those opposite think that we should not listen to Indigenous Australians about matters that affect them at all, then they should say so. They should say so. But of course we know that that is the case. This is an absolute demonstration once again that the Leader of the Opposition has nothing positive to offer the country. He is all about saying no and opposing change. And yesterday, of course, we saw him change his position between Sunrise and the Today Show. Between Sunrise and Today. It's been on and off again. And of course, the Leader of the Opposition, when it comes to the issue of Indigenous affairs, which is certainly relevant, we know that he found the apology to Stolen Generation so objectionable that he walked out. He couldn't even stay seated there. Of all the 151 members in this House, there's only one person who walked out, and he sits in the Leader of the Opposition's chair. Sits in the Leader of the Opposition's chair.
Order. The Prime Minister will return to the question. There is far too much noise. The Leader of the Opposition was heard in silence. I'm asking for all members to show restraint today. Prime Minister in continuation.
Speaker, and I was asked about my opinion, and I'm giving my opinion at this point. That was the question, completely not within standing orders, but I'm happy to do it. I'm happy to do it, Mr Speaker. What I have said is I accept the outcome of the referendum on Saturday, that I respect the fact that Indigenous people are taking the time.
Prime Minister's
taking the time
has
to
concluded. The House comes to order. I'll hear from the member for Boothby.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for the Environment and Water. How is the Albanese Labor government working to deliver the Murray-Darling Basin Plan, and why is it important for both houses of parliament to support these efforts? What are the obstacles to progress?
Call to the Minister for the Environment and Water.
Thank you so much, Mr Speaker, and thanks so much to the member for Boothby. She is absolutely determined to see the Murray-Darling Basin Plan delivered in full, as are all of us on this side and thankfully those on the crossbench as well. And today we passed legislation through the House of Representatives to do just that. I want to thank all members in the parliament who supported the bill today, because over the last month we've had a really stark reminder of just why it's necessary to deliver the Murray-Darling Basin Plan. We're seeing the return of El Niño after 3 years of good rain, in fact too much rain in some instances. We're now seeing the return to hotter, drier weather patterns. And we've seen record temperatures across the country. We've seen some of the hottest September days we've ever seen. And from painful experience, we know what this means, this next El Niño cycle. It means less rain, more extreme heat, more bushfire risk, and more pressure on our rivers and on our farmers and on the Murray-Darling Basin system, the source of drinking water for 3 million Australians. Mr Speaker, the time for talking and the time for delay is over. We must deliver this plan, and that's what we're doing. Our legislation has something that all parties should be able to support because it has something for everyone. Those opposite have asked for more time to deliver the plan, and that's what this legislation does. More time for states to complete their water efficiency projects. That's precisely what the National Party in particular have asked for. It's what the National Farmers Federation have been calling for. More time. It gives more options as well, allowing for on-farm and off-farm water efficiency projects, for land and water purchase, for counting the excess water recovered under the Bridging the Gap target towards the 450 gigalitre target. All of that means less reliance on voluntary water purchase. Again, something that the National Party should be supporting. Our bill also delivers the full 450 gigalitres of water for the environment, and that's why those sitting on the crossbench and all of our Labor MPs support it, because they know how important this is for the environment. That's why they've worked so cooperatively with us on this bill. And it's why I thank, as well as the independent members, the Greens, for voting for this legislation, and I hope that they will also support this legislation in the Senate. This is one of the largest investments in the environment that any government will ever make. This is 1 million square kilometres of inland Australia, 16 Ramsar-listed wetlands, 35 endangered species, 120 different types of water birds. The proposal is sensible, it is balanced, and I hope others step up to support it.
Give a call to the Honourable the Deputy Leader of the Opposition.
My question is to the Minister for Indigenous Australians. The Minister has previously stated the Makarrata Commission is, quote, really code for treaty without saying it, end quote.
Order. Members on my right will cease interjecting. I need to hear the question, otherwise I'll allow the Minister, the Deputy Leader, to restate a question. I've heard so far, but she'll be heard in silence for the remainder of the question.
Is the Minister still committed to treaty and truth-telling?
Order. I give the call to the Minister for Indigenous Australians. The Leader of the Opposition and the Prime Minister will cease interjecting.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. And can I thank the member for Farah for her question. The request for a voice to Parliament came from Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. That's why we took it to a referendum. It was supported by so many Indigenous people. In Waiea we thought 92%, the Tiwi Islands 84%, Maningrida 88%, and the polling team that visited Yuendamu recorded 75%. These are remarkable outcomes and tell a very important story in terms of this referendum.
Member for Bowman.
Of course, we respect the result and accept the decision of the Australian people. Our focus has always been on getting better results for Indigenous Australians. I think that's something that we all agree on.
The Minister has concluded her answer.
I have.
Give the call to the member for Reid.
My question is to the Treasurer. How is the Albanese Labor government's responsible economic management and budget strategy helping to clean up the mess we inherited and ease cost of living pressures for all Australians?
Order. Members on my left. The Minister for Climate Change and Energy will cease interjecting. When the House comes to order, there is far too much noise. The member for Mitchell is warned. The Treasurer has the call.
Yeah, thank you, Speaker. An outstanding question from an outstanding member for Reid. Mr Speaker, the member for Reid has asked me more questions about the economy in the last 2 minutes than the Shadow Treasurer has asked me for more than 2 months now, Mr Speaker, so I appreciate the question. Mr Speaker, the cost of living pressures that people are confronting are the #1 priority of this government because we understand people are doing it tough. And ever since rates and inflation started rising before the election, we have understood that first the conflict in Europe and now in the Middle East has impacted energy prices around the world, and we are seeing that here as well, and Australians are feeling that pressure at the Bowser in particular. Inflation is lower than it was last year, but it is more persistent in the global economy, and that makes it more persistent here as well. And oil prices are a bigger part of that story now, and we will see that in the inflation numbers that are released next week. Governor Bullock talked about this today as well, Mr Speaker. And this is why our primary focus is on helping Australians with the cost of living in at least 10 ways. Electricity bill relief, cheaper childcare, increased rent assistance, more Medicare bulk billing, cheaper medicines, boosting income support payments, building more affordable homes, extending PPL, fee-free TAFE and getting wages moving again, Mr Speaker. Now, this is helping to take some of the edge off cost of living pressures without adding to inflation. The Treasury says that because of some of these measures, inflation is about 3/4 of a point lower this year than it would otherwise be if those opposite had their way, Mr Speaker. Now, we're providing this $23 billion in cost of living relief at the same time as we are getting the budget in much better nick, Mr Speaker. The biggest budget turnaround in the history of this country, from a $78 billion deficit to a $22 billion surplus in 1 year, Mr Speaker. Now, our budget position is now the 4th best in the world, Mr Speaker. And under those opposite, it was the 15th best 2 years ago. In 2 years, we've turned around the 15th best budget in the world and turned it into the 4th best budget in the world, Mr Speaker. And so what we are doing, Mr Speaker, despite the nasty negativity of those opposite, we are providing cost of living help. We have overseen the creation of more jobs than any new government ever. We are skilling Australians up for better pay. We are getting the budget in much better nick, and we are cleaning up the mess that those opposite left behind, and that's why it has been months since the Shadow Treasurer has even asked me a question about the economy.
The member for Hume has been continually interjecting. I don't need the sound effects either. If he continues to interject, he'll be warned and he won't be here for question time or the MPI. Before I call the member for Kooyong, I have a few acknowledgements I'd like to do in the House. I'm pleased to inform the House that present in the gallery today is the Honourable Fred Chaney AO, former Minister, Senator for Western Australia, Member for Pearce, and the uncle of the Member for Curtin. On behalf of the House, welcome back to question time. And I'm also pleased to inform the House that present in the gallery today is the Honourable Dick Adams OAM, former Member for Lyons. And I'm also pleased to inform the House that present in the gallery today is the Honourable Jan Stuckey, former Member for Currumbin and Minister in the Queensland Government. I give the call to the Honourable Member for Kooyong.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is for the Minister for Infrastructure and Transport. Minister, the ABC recently reported that major car companies are lobbying for multiplier loopholes in the government's fuel efficiency standards. This would distort their reporting so that it would look like they were selling more EVs than they actually are. Will the minister actually formally commit to avoiding these multiplier loopholes in the government's forthcoming fuel efficiency standards?
Give the call to the Minister for Infrastructure, Transport, Regional Development and Local Government.
Can I thank very much the member for Ryan for the question. I know this is an issue. Kooyong for the question. I know this is an issue very important to her and to her electorate, but also to the whole country. We know that the Albanese government, wants Australian households and businesses to reap the benefits of modern, cheaper, low-emissions cars. Australia, alongside Russia, we are one of the two countries that do not have fuel efficiency standards, and we have, frankly, the previous government to thank for that legacy. The Australian government has committed to, as you are aware, introducing a fuel efficiency standard. Designing a fuel efficiency standard is quite a complicated process. It's why I've been meeting with a range of stakeholders on this issue. In fact, yesterday I just met with ACOS to talk about how important it is that people on low incomes benefit from electric vehicles and how we might together do that. There are fuel efficiency standards globally that include the use of multiplier credits, which some have described, as you have done, as loopholes. In our consultation, we've examined the full range of fuel efficiency standard models that are across the world, but we so far have not committed to one particular model. There will be an opportunity for stakeholders to review and discuss the options further when the government releases its impact analysis. But what I will say is that I am very determined that we will have a fuel efficiency standard that improves consumer access to cleaner, cheaper to run cars that do save consumers money. It's incredibly important that they do that, and particularly at the Bowser, while assisting Australia to reduce its carbon emissions. When it comes to closing loopholes that may be exploited by car manufacturers, we haven't taken our eye off the ball. In fact, just after question time, the Prime Minister and I and the Minister for Energy will be talking about the funding that we have, $14 million program to test the real-world emissions of vehicles to ensure that consumers do understand how much a vehicle will cost to run before they purchase it and what its real emissions will be. This information will be absolutely critical to supporting households and businesses looking to buy more sustainable cars and cheaper-to-run vehicles. That is what this fuel efficiency is all about, making sure we have access to cheaper-to-run vehicles across all levels of our income spectrum in this country. The government has, of course, released our first national electric vehicle strategy, delivering on our commitment to provide greater choice for Australians to drive cars that are cleaner and cheaper to run.
The call to the honourable member for Chisholm.
Thank you so much, Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. How is the Albanese Labor government helping relieve cost of living pressures on Australians, and is there any opposition to these actions?
The call to the Prime Minister.
I thank the member for Chisholm for her question. And of course, our number one priority is easing cost of living pressures. And there are three vital ways we are tackling cost of living. Getting costs down for families,
members on my left,
getting wages up for workers and getting the budget onto a stronger foundation, taking pressure off inflation and pressure off interest rates. The Leader of the Opposition has opposed every action we've taken. Nothing positive to offer the country, just says no and opposes any changes put forward. Now, in spite of this opposition, we've delivered $23 billion in cost of living relief to Australians to help get costs down. Cheaper childcare, increased
Wright.
rent assistance, more Medicare bulk billing, cheaper medicines, boosting income support payments, electricity bill relief, fee-free TAFE, building more affordable homes, the expansion of paid parental leave, and of course we're acting on wages as well. But those opposite oppose all of it. Just like they opposed our actions to get wages growing, they opposed even the pay rise for aged care workers and the increase in the minimum wage. They opposed an increase in the minimum wage. Well, we have created 550,000 jobs since we came to office, a record for any new government. And we did something else that those opposite never achieved in their decade in office also. We've produced a budget surplus, turning a $78 billion deficit into a $22 billion surplus.
Order.
Now, they vote against all of this. I mean, one area, though, we prioritise growth, but one area where we've never seen any growth is in the Leader of the Opposition. 15 years after he walked out on the apology, he hasn't grown a bit, Mr Speaker. He's such a development-free zone, I'm worried the Greens will start warming to him. Because if you want nothing to happen, he's your guy. He's your guy. No growth, no development, just staying in the same old reactionary position, dragging the Liberal Party to the right. We talk about going forward. He has no plan, just sitting there saying what he's against. Now, they voted against secure jobs and better pay. They ran up the biggest budget deficit in Australian history, but we on this side are cleaning up the mess.
Far too much noise on my left. The member for Durack, the member for Deakin were constantly interjecting during that answer. It's highly disorderly. I'll take action if it continues. The member for Mallee has the call.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Indigenous Australians. On the 6th of February this year, the Albanese government announced a $250 million package for Central Australia. How much money has been expended to date?
Order. The member for Lingiari will cease interjecting before the minister has even begun. The Minister for Indigenous Australians has the call.
Mr Speaker, and can I thank the member for her question. The member is correct in that we announced a $250 million investment into Central Australia. People across this chamber understand some of the challenges faced by Central Australia. I have visited Alice Springs and surrounding regions on a number of occasions. When we first got to Central Australia, because of the actions of the previous government, youth services were about to close. 25 about to tell you if you stop. $25 million was expended to keep those youth services open. That's the first thing. The second thing is recently I announced an $18.4 million package in terms of FASD, ADHD and other neurological issues faced by children in Central Australia. The Congress of First Peoples, which is the Aboriginal Medical Service out there, means that they can reach double the number of children that were previously part of the FASD program. We have also expended money through Minister Clare, $40.1 million in terms of the schools right across Central Australia. This means schools like Yuendamu get an extra $1.4 or to $1.8 million. So $40.1 million across schools in Central Australia has been expended. We have spent $2 million on the Tangentyere Women's Service, which means that they are able to service more people in the town camps when it comes to domestic violence. We've expended over $100,000 in Katherine in terms of the legal service there, but that particularly serves women that have been victims of domestic violence. And we are laying out plans now, working with the Local Government Association in terms of $18 million into justice reinvestment programs. That is not everything, but it gives you a very good example of what we're doing in Central Australia. We take our responsibilities there extremely seriously.
Order. The call to the member for Bean.
Speaker, my question is to the Minister for Home Affairs. The recently released Nixon report exposed extensive exploitation of the visa system, but it's not the first review to do so. What actions are the Albanese Labor government taking to tackle the very serious issues in the migration system?
Excellent question.
Give the call to the Minister for Home Affairs and the Minister for Cyber Security.
Thank you so much, Speaker, and could I thank the member for Bean for his excellent question. I've spoken to the House this week about the Nixon report and its findings about the serious and systemic failures in our migration system. To remind the House, Christine Nixon, a former police commissioner, reviewed our migration system and found that the system was being used to perpetrate some of the worst crimes there are: sexual exploitation, human trafficking, and that things were so bad that Australia had become a target for organised crime as a result. And she found that the root causes of this problem were delay and a profound lack of enforcement, overseen by the opposition leader who sits opposite me now. Now, what we know, Speaker, is that the opposition leader cannot claim to have not known about these problems while he was minister, because there was report.
The minister will pause. The member for Deakin will leave the chamber under 94A. When you're told to cease interjecting, that's the time to cease interjecting. The minister in continuation.
Thank you, Speaker. The opposition leader can't claim to have not known about these problems because while he was minister, he received repeated reports that told him some variation on this subject. In 2016, the Senate Education and Employment References Committee published a report simply called A National Disgrace: The Exploitation of Temporary Work Visa Holders. The opposition leader did nothing. In 2017, a study from the University of New South Wales exposed exploitation of temporary migrants. The opposition leader did nothing. In 2018, the Fair Work Ombudsman released findings of a 4-year inquiry showing widespread non-compliance amongst employers. The opposition leader did nothing. In 2019, the former Assistant Minister in the Home Affairs portfolio, the member for Latrobe, oversaw a report and said himself, organised crime and illegitimate labour hire companies are using immigration loopholes to bring out illegal workers who are often vulnerable and open to exploitation. This represents an orchestrated scam that enables these criminal elements to exploit foreign workers in Australia. The opposition leader did nothing. Speaker, 5 reports in 6 years, all of them ignored by the opposition leader, who refused to do the hard work to fix this system. Instead, he focused his energy and attention on building a completely hypocritical public reputation on being a tough guy on our borders, when he was absolutely the opposite. Speaker, we are taking a different approach.
Order.
We are taking serious action because we are serious about this problem. Now, this work is going to take a bit of time, but I can tell the parliament we have done so much already. We've rebuilt the immigration compliance section in our department. We've given new powers and funding to those that regulate migration agents. We've invested an additional $50 million in making sure people follow the rules. Speaker, the Nixon review is a 44-page indictment on the opposition leader and the incompetent way he managed our borders. I spoke yesterday about one case where a criminal walked into our country and set up an exploitation ring, just as he had done in another country. The opposition leader let him into Australia and let him stay, bouncing from visa to visa to visa. Well, our government kicked him out and put a lifetime ban on him ever returning to our country.
Concluded. The call to the honourable member for Hume.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. The Prime Minister promised on 97 occasions to reduce power bills by $275. The Prime Minister has also promised on 34 occasions to implement the Uluru Statement in full. Can Australians believe anything this weak Prime Minister says?
Order. Members, the Minister for Home Affairs will cease ejecting. The member for Hunter will leave the chamber under 94A. Order. Interjecting before a minister or Prime Minister speaks is highly disorderly. The Prime Minister has the call.
It will be very difficult to not be relevant to that question, given I think it was about the voice, it was about energy, climate change, it was about a whole range of things and commitments. We committed, prior to the election, to having an energy policy.
Just one.
Just one? And we got one. We got one. We've got one with a net zero by 2050 target, with a 43% reduction
business
by 2030, with a
Hume.
safeguard mechanism system in place to drive down the emissions of the top emitters in an orderly way so that business can have certainty to invest. We committed to re-engaging with the world on climate change, and the visit from our friend, the Prime Minister of Fiji, is another reminder that instead of being in the naughty corner, as Australia was in the Pacific, in our region when it comes to climate change, we are now constructive contributors when it comes to climate change. We also, of course, committed to having a referendum when it comes to the constitutional recognition through a voice to Parliament. We said we would do it, we did it, and the Australian people had their say, and we accept that outcome as we should in our democratic process. But those opposite, of course, have a different position every single day. And the opposition leader, of course, has been called out for the fact that he makes things up regularly, sometimes several times a day. David Crowe in the Herald spoke about...
Order. Just ask the Prime Minister to pause so I can hear from the member for Moreton. Will not be interjecting any more during question time. The member for Hume on a point of order.
Relevance, Mr Speaker. We've given him 2 minutes and 20 seconds, and he is not talking about the question. The question was very specific.
Resume your seat. Resume your seat. The question said at the end, can Australians believe anything the Prime Minister says? That was in the question. Can Australians believe anything the Prime Minister says? Order. Order. I call the Manager of Opposition Business.
Parliamentary language, and the Prime Minister should immediately withdraw that.
To assist the House, I'm just going to ask the Prime Minister to withdraw. I'm just going to ask the Prime Minister to quickly withdraw.
We all heard the question. I was answering the question. Okay, read the question. Go on. Take up more.
Well, if you take your seat for a moment, just ask the Prime Minister to quickly withdraw to assist the House.
I withdraw.
If it helps the House, and to assist the House, as I'm always pleased to do, I can repeat the I can repeat the question put by the Shadow Treasurer. Yeah. Can Australians believe anything this week Prime Minister says? That's what he said.
The Deputy Leader of the House has the call.
That is a complete abuse of standing orders. We allowed the Shadow Treasurer, because he has so little time at the dispatch box, to make a ridiculous point of relevance
the Deputy Leader
with
of the House,
with the most wide-ranging question.
The Deputy Leader of the House will. I thank the order. The members on my left will cease interjecting. I thank the Leader of the Opposition for his assistance, and I thank the Deputy Leader of the House for his assistance. Win-win. Now, the Prime Minister has 40 seconds remaining. I'm just going to ask him to return to the question.
Mr. Speaker, the Shadow Treasurer, who's incapable of asking a question of the Treasurer about the economy, who puts in every now and again puts in an MPI, hoping that no one will be here to listen. Every day. In prime time, later in the afternoon, here's a joke.
Order. When the House comes to order, the member for Latrobe. I'll hear from the member for Macon.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Defence Industry. How is the Albanese Labor government ensuring the Australian Defence Force has the weapons and equipment needed for Australia's national security? And why are improvements in defence capability acquisition needed after a wasted decade in defence procurement?
Give a call to the Minister for Defence Industry and the Minister for International Development and the Pacific.
Thank you, Speaker, and I thank the member for Macon for his question. Speaker, the Albanese Labor government is providing the critical capabilities that Australia needs to maintain our national security.
The Minister will pause.
Unlike the opposition,
the Minister will pause
we're not governing via media release.
The Minister will pause. There is far too much noise. I can't hear a word the Minister is saying. The Leader of the Opposition is not helping, and he will cease interjecting. The question was heard in silence. I'm going to ask for silence for the remainder of this minister's answer. Order. The minister has the call.
Thank you, Speaker. As I was saying, unlike the opposition, we don't govern via media releases. We're bringing forward capabilities to deal with our strategic circumstances. We brought forward the Army's new infantry fighting vehicles, so much so that the last one will come off the production line before the first one would have started under those opposites. We're also urgently fixing the defence procurement misses left by the opposition leader when he was the defence minister. We're fixing things such as the battlefield airlift aircraft that can't fly into battlefields. We're repairing the patrol boats where the opposition leader allowed the use of imported rusty aluminium. Imagine that. The Defence Minister's allowing rusty aluminium to be imported. We're also now fixing a significant issue with our Navy supply vessels. These are the massive supply ships.
The minister will pause. The minister will pause. There is far too much noise. The Leader of the Opposition will cease interjecting. Order. The minister will resume his seat. There's far too much noise. There's now a general warning issued to the entire House, which means if people continue to interject, they will leave. Without a warning, the disruption will not continue. The Minister in continuation.
We're also now fixing a significant issue with our Navy supply vessels. These are the massive supply vessels that the opposition, when they were in government, offshored. They allowed these vessels to be built in a foreign country because they didn't believe in Australian manufacturing. And now we're seeing serious issues with the quality of work. We've just discovered that metal is leaching from some of the pipes into the drinking water in parts of the ship. This is now so serious that our brave sailors can't access drinking water in parts of these very important vessels, all because of the incompetence of the opposition leader when he was the Defence Minister, Speaker. That is what we see when they're in government, Speaker. We're also fixing issues through our reforms to the defence procurement process. We will repair the damage done by the opposition leader when he was in government. Days before the last election, the Defence Minister at the time, the now opposition leader, announced he was throwing out a tender process and sole sourcing a particular drone, a drone used by a particular number of countries. Those countries were Russia, Myanmar and China. That's the quality of the work from the opposition leader. We've now taken action and reversed that decision. Our government is serious about taking reforms on defence, fixing the projects that he allowed to slip. Under his role as Defence Minister, 28 major projects were running 97 years late and $6.5 billion over budget. By contrast, the Albanese Labor government is committed to defending the nation, reforming defence and delivering the capabilities the ADF needs, unlike the opposition leader who can't be trusted on defence.
Give the call to the order. When the House comes to order, I'll hear from the member for Nichols.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Did the Prime Minister ever receive advice from a member or members of the referendum working group suggesting the referendum be delayed to a date later than the 14th of October?
Give the call to the Prime Minister.
No, Mr Speaker, is the answer to the question. Indeed, Yunupingu had this to say, Mr Speaker, when talking about the Uluru Statement from the Heart and about what needed to happen. He said this: "So the task remains to reconcile with the truth, to find the unity and achieve the settlement. A Prime Minister must lead it and complete it. The leader of the nation should accept his or her commission and simply say what he or she thinks is right and put that forward for the nation to correct or to accept or to reject. Let us have an honest answer from the Australian people to an honest question." Mr Speaker, we did that. And I note that very insensitively last week the Leader of the Opposition raised Yunupingu, something that I know from speaking to some of the leaders in the Yolngu people there in Arnhem Land. They were terribly offended by, given the role that Yunupingu played in the Uluru Statement from the Heart. That's something for the Leader of the Opposition to consider. But I note as well, that the Leader of the Opposition in the other place had this to say: "The perceptions of intolerance created by some hasn't just cost the votes of those who feel judged, it has hurt the Liberal Party among all people who reject nastiness or divisiveness." They're the words of Senator Simon Birmingham, the Leader of the Liberal Party in the Senate. And, of course, in this chamber, the member for Bass has had to say that I think the party needs to stop ideological dog whistling. Mr Speaker, we had a referendum in accordance with the commitment that I gave to the Australian people. We had it at a time, 18 months in, which was similar to what John Howard promised in 2007 he would do. We did it to separate it away from when elections would be, and we did it. Anyone who had a look at the parliamentary sitting timetable could have worked out some time ago what the options were for dates of the referendum. I outlined, indeed last year, post my speech to Gama, where I outlined the draft. We changed that, of course, in accordance with the advice that we got, but we also outlined a timetable of when the referendum would be held.
Give the call to the honourable member for Higgins.
Thank you, Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Skills and Training. How will the Albanese Labor government's landmark 5-year National Skills Agreement embed national cooperation and strategic investment in our vocational education and training sector after a wasted decade? And what has been the response to the agreement?
Call to the Minister for Skills and Training.
Speaker, can I thank the member for Higgins for her question and her strong support for the vet sector. Speaker, we have, of course, landed a very important, landmark agreement for the vet sector, reaching an accord with the state and territory governments. And I want to thank the Prime Minister for making that happen finally this week. I'd like to thank my counterpart ministers and all state and territory governments for working with me over the last 12 months to make sure we did that, because we need to ensure that we have an agreement that can drive skills, that can supply the skills in areas of demand. We have very major challenges in sectors of our economy, the transformation of the energy sector, making sure that we've got greater sovereign capability, ensuring we respond to the labour and skill supply in the care economy, just to mention a few. And I'd like to thank those ministers for their very collaborative efforts to date. I'd also like to inform the House, if I may, the response by industry to this agreement, because this really does, I think, underline that we are working across the economy, constituent parts of the economy. The Australian Chamber of Commerce Industry CEO Andrew McKellar has said with respect to the agreement that the best way for Australia to avoid recurring skill shortages is to invest strongly in training Australians. This new agreement has inbuilt features to prevent further skill shortages. The Business Council of Australia CEO Bram Black spoke of the vital role the vet sector must play in developing critical skills needed to meet current and future workforce needs. The ACTU and AEU called the skills agreement a game changer that will make an incredible difference to working people and the next generation coming through. That's right, unions. You heard the word? That's all right. Is that okay?
It triggered him.
Order.
And Innes Willox, can I quote Innes Willox? Is that okay? Innes Willox, head of the AI Group, said that this agreement could not be more timely, and he called it an historic and economy-changing plan. That's what Innes Willox said about this agreement, if that's okay with you. And he's right, of course, Speaker, to fix the massive skill shortage that we inherited, to rebuild and renovate the vet sector. We need to have this agreement. And can I say it is the first national skills agreement in a decade. In a decade. What were you doing over those last 9 years? Nothing. Completely incompetent, unable to deliver any decent agreement with respect to skills and training in this country. Speaker, we have the Deputy Leader of the Opposition calling fee-free TAFE wasteful spending, and yet 215,000 Australians are enrolling courses of demand to supply the skills that our economy need, that businesses need, that workers and students need, and we'll continue to work with state and territory governments and industry to supply those needs.
Just before I call the member for Goldstein, I just want to remind ministers, I didn't want to interrupt during the answer, but under page 504 of Practice and Standing Order 65A, it's not acceptable to say you when speaking to another member in the chamber. Before I call the member for Goldstein, I'd also like to recognise former Queensland Minister the Honourable Neil Roberts in the gallery, and long-serving former Brisbane City Councillor and my former colleague, Councillor Kim Plesser, and the Melbourne City Football Club from the electorate of Holt. Welcome to you all. Give the call to the honourable member for Goldstein.
To the Prime Minister. Considering the situation in Israel and Gaza, many members of the Goldstein community and other diverse communities are feeling anxious, insecure and unsafe. When can vulnerable institutions in our communities, including synagogues and schools in Goldstein and surrounds, expect to get access to fast-tracked grants promised by the government or other support?
Give the call to the Prime Minister.
I thank the member for Goldstein very much for her question. I thank her for engagement. We had a meeting along with some others yesterday at which this issue, of course, was one of the issues that was raised. The government earlier on this week, I announced the additional $10 million that the Cabinet made a decision of on Monday to add to the $40 million that we committed to the Securing Faith-Based Places program. I can indicate to the member for Goldstein that today the government is awarding the $50 million program in full to help keep Australians across the country being able to practice their religion in a safe way. The Albanese government is committed to ensuring that people of all faiths can live in Australia free from violence and discrimination. The $50 million Securing Faith-Based Places program grants will improve security at religious schools and preschools, places of worship and faith-based community centres. Grants have been approved in every state and territory across different faith communities, including, of course, the Jewish community and the Islamic community, who are both feeling particularly vulnerable at the moment. The Securing Faith-Based Places program helps protect Australians from crime and violence motivated by religious or racial intolerance by funding security infrastructure, and that is why it is an important program. Can I say as well, Mr Speaker, that we have seen a devastating loss of innocent life since the heinous attacks on Israel by the terrorist group Hamas. The scenes that we've seen today from the explosion at a Gaza City hospital are deeply distressing. It is clear there has been a devastating loss of life, and our thoughts are with those killed, those injured and their loved ones. The protection of civilian lives must come first, and respect for international humanitarian law is absolutely paramount. We condemn, as a government, any indiscriminate attacks and targeting of civilian infrastructure, including hospitals. Australia joins with others in calling for international law to always be upheld. Mr Speaker, every innocent life matters, whether Israeli or Palestinian. Every innocent life matters. And here in Australia, where we can be, I think, a microcosm for the world, where people overwhelmingly live in harmony next to each other, enriched by the diversity of communities like the member for Goldstein's and my own and the electorate of Grayndler. I see our diversity as a strength, but we need to cherish it and we can't take it for granted, and that's why we need to work as well and follow the advice of the Director-General of ASIO as well, and work with all community leaders to make sure that harmony is maintained in this nation.
Indulgence, the Honourable the Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you very much. On indulgence, I join with the Prime Minister's remarks, and Prime Minister and I spoke on Monday in relation to these matters, and included in that conversation was a conversation about the support for communities to increase safety, and we very much support the government's announcement. Obviously, when we were in government, there was a significant effort undertaken to provide support to faith-based organisations, and others in the community that felt a vulnerability, and obviously that is heightened at this point in time. The tragic circumstances that we see, as we commented on at the beginning of the week, and to the great credit of this chamber, where there was a bipartisan position in condemning the actions of the terrorist group Hamas, and nobody wants to see loss of any civilian life, and the conduct of Hamas in telling people to stay in harm's way is a deplorable act, but not the first and not the last. We are sure of that. To the Islamic communities here in our country, to people of Jewish faith, to people of any faith, they deserve to live in our country unencumbered by racism, by prejudice, or by attacks otherwise, and this parliament has and always will stand for those principles, and we support the government in those endeavours.
Give a call to the honourable member for Wills.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Early Childhood Education. How is the Albanese Labor government building a strong and sustainable early childhood education workforce by investing in quality training and helping educators to build their skills?
Call to the Minister for Early Childhood Education and the Minister for Youth.
Thank you very much, Speaker, and can I thank the member for Wills for his question. Mr Speaker, in this role I have an absolute privilege of getting to visit early childhood education centres, meeting with the wonderful dedicated professionals who are educators and teachers, and most enjoyably, of course, meeting with the children at those centres. and all of them are memorable, but the one that I visited with the member for Wills was particularly memorable. It was the Lake Park Bilingual Kindergarten in Coburg, where we sat with the children and heard a story read to us in Italian, a wonderful example of the benefits of early childhood education and care and the transformative nature that it has for the lives of children. Now, of course, the member for Wills, as do all of us in the Albanese government, understand just how important access to good quality early childhood education is. And that's why we delivered practical cost of living relief by making early childhood education and care more affordable for over 1.2 million families across Australia. And I'm delighted to inform the House that in the first week of these landmark reforms, families paid on average, around 14% less per hour per child for centre-based care. That's directly due to the work of the Albanese Labor government in making early childhood education and care more affordable, paying a triple dividend. It's good for children, good for families, and of course it's good for the economy. And we also recognise that the key to ensuring access to quality early childhood education and care lies in a strong and sustainable workforce of educators. And since the Albanese Labor government came to office, I'm pleased to inform the House that there are over 14,000 new educators in the sector and 123,000 in training pathways, in no small part due to the efforts of this government through fee-free TAFE. And the Certificate 3 in Early Childhood Education and Care is the most popular fee-free TAFE course right across Australia. We're also delivering $72 million in workforce package specifically targeted at ensuring educators have access to paid practicums and professional development, a direct outcome of the conversations that I've had with early childhood educators across Australia. The government is investing in the workforce that Australia needs to build a better future, and I congratulate Minister O'Connor for ensuring that the workforce needs for our critical education and care economy sectors are at the centre of the recently announced National Skills Agreement, a landmark agreement that will ensure we are investing in Australia's future.
Give the call to the member for Forrest.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Prime Minister. Families in Western Australia are bracing for a price hike of 12% for gas, as WA's major distributor is looking to increase charges by 39% from early 2025. Why did the Prime Minister choose to focus on his divisive Canberra Voice proposal and not on addressing Western Australia's already crippling gas prices?
Order. Order. When the House comes to order, the Prime Minister has the call.
Speaker, if I can understand, if I can understand the question from the member for Forrest, just actually ask me, but they managed to still work in the voice of the question. Having asked every question every day for not just before a referendum but afterwards about it, they then come in here and ask a question which is, why are you obsessed with it? They ask nothing about cost of living. They have a shadow treasurer. They have a shadow treasurer who doesn't know, I don't think, that this bloke here is the treasurer, because he doesn't recognise competence and skills when he sees it. The opposition.
The Prime Minister. Order. The Prime Minister will pause. I'd like to. The Treasurer and the Shadow Treasurer will be both on warnings. It won't be here. You can have it outside. The Deputy Leader of the Opposition is on her feet for a point of order.
A point of order on relevance, Mr Speaker. How can this possibly be relevant to the question that the member for Forrest asked about fuel prices in WA? And how can it possibly be relevant?
The Prime Minister was asked a question about power prices, and particularly regarding Western Australia, and then the remainder of the question was about the referendum when other issues could have been focused on. So I'm just going to listen carefully to the Prime Minister.
I'm certainly talking about the part of the question which said, what is it that we're concentrating our efforts on? And we have been working on cost of living measures, including, pleased to say, there's an Medicare urgent care clinic heading to Bunbury, your way. One of the ones that is
the Minister for Climate Change.
That is coming. No doubt when we go and open it, you can organise a demo or something. But we of course, the member opposite voted against the measures that have put downward pressure when it comes to gas. They voted against it. They voted against it. They voted against cheaper childcare, increased rent assistance, more Medicare bulk billing, cheaper medicines, boosting income support payments, fee-free TAFE. They're against all of that, Mr Speaker, because their concentration on issues. They've asked this year one question about AUKUS or international national security. Now we're in a situation whereby we're in a globally uncertain world. They've asked 0 questions about resources or critical minerals. Nothing ever in the entire term about skills or TAFE. Not a single question this entire term about manufacturing. Not a single question about education. Not one. The entire term. 1 question about wages and 9 questions about health. But 93 questions about the voice or other matters.
Order.
93.
The Prime Minister's time.
I'll leave those who watch Question Time to decide
concluded.
who's obsessed.
I'll hear from the member for Swan.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Social Services. How is the Albanese Labor government delivering incentives to help more Australians take up work as one of the immediate actions of the Employment White Paper?
Give the call to the Minister for Social Services.
Well, thank you, Speaker. And I'd like to thank the member for Swan for her question and the advocacy she provides in her electorate. Today I did introduce to deliver on some of the immediate actions the government is taking to deliver on the objectives of our Employment White Paper. Now, since the Jobs and Skills Summit last year and through the comprehensive Employment White Paper process led by our Treasurer, we have outlined a roadmap to how we achieve a vision to ensure everyone has the opportunity for secure, fairly paid work. Now, one of the focus areas of the White Paper is about how we overcome barriers to employment and broaden opportunity. And of course, last year we voted on a piece of legislation to temporarily boost the pensioner work bonus to support older Australians into more work if they choose. Of course, the legislation I introduced today will make these improvements to the work bonus permanent. It will give older Australians more choice and continued flexibility to participate in the workforce if they would like to. The improvements will mean all new pension entrants over pension age will receive a $4,000 work bonus starting balance, an increase to the maximum work bonus income balance from $7,800 to $11,800, and this will be permanent. The changes will take effect from the 1st of July 2024, pending the passage of the legislation. This will ensure that there is no gap between the existing temporary measure and the commencement of the new ongoing provisions that we know are a positive incentive for older Australians. Now, this change has been endorsed by the CEO of the Council of the Ageing, Patricia Sparrow, who said the incentive allows those who do wish to do more work to do so, and she called these changes a great step forward. Ian Henschke from National Seniors said this puts more money into the pockets of working pensioners. Now, another immediate action this government is taking is smoothing the transition for income support to work by extending the employment income nil rate period for people on income support from 12 to 24 weeks and expanding access to those entering full-time employment. This measure is designed to address concerns that losing access to benefits or having to reapply and wait for income support acts as a discouragement to taking up work, particularly short-term and casual work. Now, these measures introduced today are practical measures to support people into work and are complemented by a range of other initiatives taken by my colleagues right across the board, where this government is supporting Australians get secure, fairly paid work, and we will continue to do so.
Give the call to the honourable member for Wentworth.
My question is to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy. Households are struggling with their power bills because of high fossil fuel prices. The best way to reduce these is by helping them electrify with cheaper renewable energy. But it's not easy, particularly for those who rent. In the US, the Inflation Reduction Act provides incentives of $14,000 to every household to electrify, and it's making a huge difference. Will the minister put households at the centre of Australia's response to the IRA, and will this include specific support for renters, like the measures I recently proposed?
Give the call to the Minister for Climate Change and Energy.
Well, thanks very much, Mr Speaker. I appreciate the question from the honourable member for Wentworth. And our response to the Biden administration's Inflation Reduction Act has and will focus on making things in Australia, because we believe Australia, as well as being a renewable energy superpower, can be a manufacturing power as well. And we have no greater opportunity to make things in Australia, to re-enliven the Australian manufacturing industry, creating good jobs for Australian manufacturing workers, than renewable energy. And our initial response to the Inflation Reduction Act was our Hydrogen Head Start program and $2 billion. And just last week I opened expressions of interest in that, so we're making good progress on that, and we've said we'll have more to say this year. But the honourable member is right, though. More needs to be done to support renters and apartment dwellers and low-income dwellers in electrifying, in improving energy efficiency and in switching to renewables. That is right. And there are two elements of our policy we are already implementing which do just that. There is our social housing support under our Household Energy Savings Plan and our solar banks policy. And I'll just give the House a quick update on both of them. On solar banks, we have committed, and we took the election, $100 million, and we are focusing efforts directly on apartment dwellers and renters. And we have already announced agreements with Victoria, the Northern Territory and the ACT. And this makes a big difference. For example, in Victoria, we are providing up to $2,800 an apartment, or more than $100,000 an apartment block, to help with the transition to renewables. This will help around 5,000 apartments in Victoria, and we'll have more announcements to make with other jurisdictions in coming weeks. Also, social housing, as I've said before to the House. People who live in social housing deserve this support as well. Our social housing stock is well over 20 years old on average, and these houses are often energy inefficient. They don't include renewable energy. Our program announced in the budget of $300 million of support for social housing has already been rolled out, and we are requiring co-investments from the states and territories to drive that investment further. So hence we're negotiating with the states and territories, and we've already announced the deal with Victoria, and there'll be further announcements in coming weeks about other jurisdictions. And we'll continue to work, because the honourable member is correct, and other honourable members have been focused on this and raising it with me as well, the need to support apartment dwellers in particular. The members for Macnamara and Reid and Bennelong in particular, the members for Wills, have been raising these issues within the government as well, the need to provide more support, because there are challenges for apartment dwellers, there are real challenges for renters, and we will ensure they are not left behind as we transition to cheaper renewable energy.
Give the call to the honourable member for Canberra.
Thank you, Speaker.
My question is to the Minister for Health. How is the Albanese Labor government working for Australians to strengthen Medicare after a decade of cuts and neglect?
Call to the Minister for Health and Aged Care.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and I thank the member for Canberra for her question and also for taking part in the announcement this morning of the Inner North Medicare Urgent Care Clinic. This will be one of 5 clinics across Canberra which build on the ACT's highly successful nurse-led walk-in clinics with additional services like nurse practitioner services, allied health professional services like emergency physio and access to imaging services to help with fractures and the like. There are now 30 Medicare urgent care clinics around Australia already open and operating. 12 additional providers have already been announced, and all 58 will be open and operating by the end of the year, Mr Speaker. These clinics are going to be operating 7 days a week. Those open are already doing that, extended hours, and they're open to walk-in patients who need urgent care for non-life-threatening emergencies. In just a matter of weeks, those services that are open have seen about 50,000 patients. A third of them are kids under 15. A third of them have been seen on weekends, and those seen on weekdays, 1 in 5 have been seen after 6 p.m. This is already, Mr Speaker, making it easier to see a doctor when and where people need it, but importantly, also taking much-needed pressure off our local hospital emergency departments. And, Mr Speaker, importantly, every service is fully bulk billed because, for this side of the parliament, bulk billing is the beating heart of Medicare. After 10 years of cuts and neglect to our Medicare system, bulk billing, we know, has been in serious decline and gap fees have been rising. The member for Canberra knows that as well as anyone, because here in the ACT we have some of the lowest rates of bulk billing in the country. And none of this was an accident, Mr Speaker, because the Liberal Party has never supported bulk billing. We remember John Howard called it an absolute rort. The Leader of the Opposition, when he was Health Minister, complained that there were, in his words, too many free Medicare services. Well, he took care of that, Mr Speaker. He took care of that, famously trying to abolish bulk billing altogether, making every single patient pay every single time they visited a doctor. And when he couldn't get that through the Senate, Mr Speaker, instead he started a 6-year-long freeze of the Medicare rebate. Well, our approach could not be more different, Mr Speaker. The centrepiece of our budget delivered by this Treasurer in May was the biggest investment in bulk billing in the 40-year history of Medicare, tripling the bulk billing incentive, a measure that takes effect in just 2 weeks' time, making it easier for 11 million Australians to see a doctor free of charge. That's working for Australia to strengthen Medicare.
Call the Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, I ask that further questions be posted on the notice paper.
I give the call to the Prime Minister.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. On indulgence, my thoughts, and I'm sure the thoughts of all members of the House, with the family, friends and community of Mr Richard Maney, who has passed away in Temagog. That's a place on the North Coast, and the member for Cowper left Parliament yesterday to be with his local community. This is a man who has unfortunately died trying to save his family farm from bushfires. We know that this spring and summer is going to be incredibly difficult for a number of our communities and may bring back memories of the awful Black Summer bushfires. That is why we hosted recently the Australia's first ever National Disaster Preparedness Summit to prepare for the coming higher risk weather season. We are concerned about what is approaching, and the National Emergency Management Agency is working with state and territory counterparts and local communities. Again, I urge all residents to listen to authorities and seek help if needed. The federal government will continue to work with all jurisdictions, as well as I pay tribute as well to the extraordinary both formal personnel whose job it is, but also all those volunteers who just do extraordinary work at this time. To Mr Maney's family, friends and community, our deepest respects and our condolences at this very sad loss.
And on indulgence, the Honourable, the Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. On behalf of the Coalition, we send our condolences to Mr Maney's family and to his community. As the Prime Minister rightly points out, each bushfire season brings with it a new threat, and the effort of individuals to protect their own property, driving machinery, whether it's being a part of the local Rural Fire Brigade, part of the local SES, there is an inherent danger in adverse conditions, particularly given the urgency of the task undertaken and the threat level elevates. And in this terrible circumstance, a brave man has lost his life, and we send our condolences to that community, as I say, and also our best wishes to those who are seeking to contain the fires, those who are responding, the first responders otherwise, who have the task, as we quite often remind ourselves in this chamber, of rushing toward danger when most other Australians are rushing the other way from it. And that is a particular skill that we should recognise, but a level of bravery and decency that makes us the greatest country in the world, and we should stop, pause and remember that in the run-up to the bushfire season this year and those who are facing a threat as we speak this very moment.
The Leader of the Opposition has indicated to me that he is seeking a personal explanation.
Thank you very much, Mr Speaker. I seek leave to make a personal explanation.
You claim to be misrepresented.
Most grievously, Mr Speaker.
You may proceed.
Mr Speaker, during the course of question time today, there were many and varied misrepresentations of me made by the government and the Prime Minister in particular, but all of that's part of the hustle and bustle of this chamber. But there's nothing more egregious that the Prime Minister said during question time than to cast an aspersion on comments I made in relation to a great Australian, Yunupingu. Last Tuesday in Adelaide I said the following, and these are the remarks that the Prime Minister made reference to. I think there's also an important point to make that in many Indigenous communities, East Arnhem Land, for example, they've got a 90% attendance rate at school, they've got a logging company, they've got a building company, they've got housing, they've got a functioning society, and in that instance it's because of the leadership demonstrated by Yunupingu and others around him over the course of a long period, and that's what we want to see replicated elsewhere. That was the extent of my comment in relation to Mr Yunupingu, and for the Prime Minister to misrepresent that in a way today to suggest that I had dishonoured Mr Yunupingu or said something in a derogatory way in relation to Mr Yunupingu reflects more on the Prime Minister, frankly, than it does myself.
Just move. Does the member for Wannon claim to be misrepresented?
No, but I have a question of you, Mr Speaker, where you might be able to assist. During question time, the Acting Minister of Defence misled the House. He said that aluminium rusts, and that is just not true. I have an aluminium smelter in my electorate, and I think that it would help the House, and I don't want to take it any further than it needs to, if he could come back and just correct the record that aluminium doesn't actually rust.
Just take that as a comment, because I'm sure the minister will make himself avail of your comments. I thank the member. We move to papers. Pursuant to Section 65 of the Parliamentary Service Act 1999, I present the annual report of the Department of Parliamentary Services for 2022-2023. I also present a corrigendum relating to Table 50 in the 2022-2023 annual report of the Department of Parliamentary Services. Papers I call the Deputy Leader of the House.
Thank you, Speaker. Mr Speaker, these documents are tabled in accordance with the list circulated to honourable members earlier today. Full details of the documents will be recorded in the votes and proceedings.